As the U.S. continues to advance propaganda designed to lead us into conflict with Iran and promote regime change within the country, we're told the protests that started in Iran in December were organic and due to the country's economic crisis. Now, to some extent, this is true. But what was the cause of the economic crisis? U.S. Secretary of Treasury Scott Bessent is on the record twice recently explaining how the U.S. contributed to Iran's economic instability, first at the World Economic Forum, and then also last week during his testimony to the House Financial Services Committee. Here he is speaking at the World Economic Forum.
Two things there. There are Treasury sanctions. And if you look at a speech that I gave at the Economic Club of New York last March, I said that I believe the Iranian currency was on the verge of collapse, that if I were an Iranian citizen, I would take my money out. President Trump ordered Treasury and our OFAC division, Office of Foreign Asset Control, to put maximum pressure on Iran, and it's worked. Because in December, their economy collapsed. We saw a major bank go under. The central bank has started to print money. There is a dollar shortage. They are not able to get imports, and this is why the people took to the street. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here.
So this makes it clear why Scott Bessent was the perfect guy to be Trump's Secretary of Treasury. As a former partner of Soros Fund Management, yes, that's Soros, as in George Soros, the billionaire globalist known for currency manipulation and funding non-governmental organizations to destabilize countries. I mean, he's probably funding some of the agitators that are currently destabilizing Minneapolis, either through one of his Open Societies foundations or through the Tides Foundation. But that's why Bessent is now Trump's golden boy. He's perfect for weaponizing the Treasury Department against any regime that Trump sets his targets on. He can identify the economic weaknesses and leverage them to the advantage of the U.S. and its allies. That's what he did for decades. Shortly after being hired by Soros in 1991, he quickly became the head of the London office. Now, it was next year the Maastricht Treaty was signed, and this was the treaty that established the European Union and would further evolve the process of European integration and eventually lead to the euro. Now, Britain had already joined the system that was in place in 1990, which was known as the ERM. The ERM was meant to limit fluctuations between the different ECU currencies. The ERM, it stood for the exchange rate mechanism. And so what the ERM did was it had this accounting unit called the ECU, the European Currency Unit, and they used that to determine the exchange rates and reserves among the member states. Now, the problem was that when Britain joined the ERM system, economists had pointed out that the pound was overvalued at 2.95 Deutschmarks to the pound. And this timing would be really bad because the ERM required their member countries and central banks to keep their respective currencies within agreed upon trading ranges, which they called bands. So this basically limited Britain's flexibility when it came to interest rates as far as strengthening and weakening their currency. So when George Soros noted that the pound was overvalued, they decided to move to short the pound. So George Soros, Stanley Druckenmiller, Scott Bessent, and others that were part of the Soros network took a massive short position on the pound. And on September 16th, 1992, now known as Black Wednesday, the pound collapsed. Soros and Bessent made a lot of money. Britain was forced to devalue the pound, and its participation in the ERM was suspended. Now, this wasn't just Soros. Many other banks also shorted the pound, like Citicorp, JP Morgan, Bankers Trust. They all put the pressure on. And this has led to historian Niall Ferguson describing it in his book, The Square and the Tower, as quote-unquote financial gang rape. So the reason this matters is that it demonstrates the background of our Treasury Secretary, who is so bold as to admit on the global stage that the Treasury Department is weaponizing its policies against unfavored nations. Now, many of you might shrug this off and think, what else is new? The U.S. has weaponized its currency and imposed sanctions against other countries for decades, and this is true. And some of you might be blinded by hubris and think that's what we should do. America is the strongest country in the world and might makes right. And, in reality, the U.S. has never been nearly as vulnerable as we are. We're closing in on $39 trillion of debt. We still haven't gotten our inflation problem under control. We're going to need to roll over approximately $8 to $9 trillion of our debt this year. And we've been agitating not only our enemies, but also our allies with tariffs and threatening to take Greenland by military force. We're going to need someone to buy these treasuries, or it's going to force the Fed to monetize more debt and create further inflation. So the Soros network has a history of manipulating currencies and destabilizing countries, and that's where Bessent comes from. My point being is that if you want to use the U.S. Treasury as a tool for economic warfare and destabilizing countries, who better to do that than a George Soros protege? Now, for anybody that thinks I'm just a Trump hater, I promise I want the Trump administration to succeed, because that would mean that we as a country would succeed. But I want them to enact policies and engage in good faith diplomacy that is constitutional and to the highest of moral standards. That's what American exceptionalism is about: doing the right thing, protecting the freedom of Americans at home, and providing the example to other nations abroad, not infiltrating them and causing chaos because of some perceived benefit for us or one of our allies. George Washington warned in his farewell address to avoid the mischief of foreign intrigue, the love of power, and the proneness to abuse it. He warned to avoid projects of hostility instigated by pride, ambition, and other sinister and pernicious motives. He also noted the hazards of overgrown military establishments, which under any other form of government are inauspicious to liberty, and which are to be regarded as particularly hostile to Republican liberty. And my biggest fear is that we have sacrificed the Republic on the altar of empire. We voted for Trump because he said he would keep us out of foreign entanglements. He was supposed to be the anti-war candidate, opposed to Biden, who funded the Ukraine conflict, supported Israel's genocide, and the Saudis' attacks on Yemen. But so far, Trump is proving to be even worse than Biden, and that's hard to imagine. Thank you for listening. Please like, subscribe, and comment.